What's happening? How are you? How are you holding up with this whole situation?
Um, I've become this sort of, I fall between two polar opposites of being completely cynical and trusting nobody and being completely gullible and believing anything anyone tells me. And so, which I've heard are the characteristics of paranoia.
Really?
Yeah. It's
Well,
like
how can we not be in a state of paranoia when all of the information from every source, including the institutional sources, it's suspect and it changes all the time?
Well, it has to change all the time because it's to some extent it's an evolving. We're learning as we go. So you have to have enough mental and emotional flexibility to be able to tolerate the ongoing changing nature of it. Where I find it challenging is that the disagreement about how to approach this is so contradictory. It's not like I don't
Is it?
totally. Well,
What are we going to stay in lockdown forever? I mean, everybody knows we got to go back eventually. It's like, it's just about when, isn't it?
It's about when, and I think it's about how.
How?
And then I think it's about what does it look like once it's done.
But it's all tainted by people's politics. It's like people get attached to a point of view, and nobody's reasonable or rational. You can't actually talk about it with anybody because it's all tied to Trump. It's all tied to the politics. And I don't think anybody's really rational about it. Do you? I mean, I don't get the sense.
Do you think on an individual level that I think people are generally self-interested in staying alive. And so this is the one time in a political debate where it's like, oh, this actually really directly affects me. So I'm going to actually not try to fall into groupthink. I think the challenge with groupthink right now is that everyone's afraid. And so there's nothing more opportune than fear, right? There's no more of an opportunity to sort of get people to believe a certain thing than when they're afraid.
Yeah, I guess there's people who are afraid of the virus. They're afraid they're going to die from it. They're afraid of the consequences of it. And there's people who are afraid of their civil liberties being violated and that the government and other institutions are going to use this as an opportunity to take more control of things, which is what they've done in the past. This is the pattern.
Well, but I also would argue there's a third party, which is sort of, I think, a generally reasoned group of people who do say we don't want the cure to be worse than the virus, who do say like there's got to be a way to protect and also continue on.
Yeah, no, I think that's the camp that I'm in. And at a certain point you have to take a risk. We have to take a risk and go back and see what happens. I like Naval Ravikant's. He's like, if you're under 45, you go back. Under 45, it's very low death rate. Under 45 without any kind of complications. And that you isolate the more vulnerable people of the society, which, I mean, is it fair? No, it's not fair. But if I was one of the more vulnerable people of society, I wouldn't want the entire society to shut down just for me. I'd be like, okay.
I agree, but I will say that I do, and this is where I struggle. I do think we're early enough in this pandemic that we may not know enough in terms of the pathogen to be able to make that kind of decision. And I don't know when that will be.
Right, but the consequences of staying in lockdown, first of all, we don't know the mental health issues that this is going to cause. I mean, I'm fucking going crazy over here, right? And I'm reasonably sane, and I'm in a perfect situation.
Yeah.
And I'm already cracking up. I can't imagine if you're in some little apartment in New York City with 3 kids.
Yeah, no,
the long-term ramifications of that.
The uptick of anxiety screenings and depression screenings and calls to crisis teams are up significantly, which would make sense. But then you also worry about people who have severe mental illness who aren't getting their treatment, who are confined now in their homes, right? Who may not be able to get their medication. It's a problem.
Well, and you hear that the UN just said 200,000 children are going to die because of this economic shutdown. And millions more will be thrust into poverty. We're about to enter some Great Depression, and how many people are going to die or are going to suffer because of that. And so we have to weigh all of that. And obviously it's impossible. You're never going to get it right. There's too many variables to know. There's too many unknowns, but it does seem like I just feel, my gut is like, we've got to start going back and see what happens.
But from that position, what are you assuming the driver is of those who are saying total lockdown?
Fear.
So you think it's fear. So you don't think it's any kind of agenda. You think it's that their fear, they don't know what to do. And so they're going to the strongest possible restriction.
I think they're legitimately afraid. I don't think it's completely nonsensical. I understand their point of view. However, based on recent history, a lot of people out there, if Trump says white, they say black. So when he says we got to go back, I'm a little bit suspicious that there's a certain segment of the population, including every single person on CNN, who's just going to react the opposite, because historically that's what they've done. So I'm a little suspicious of the motivations that are underneath we need to stay locked down. And also because the response is often, what, you want old people to die? It's like, dude, okay, just, can we have actually a conversation like this?
It's almost like there's two questions to answer. One is like, what's the practical next step? How do we handle this? And then what are the larger, like, what is this? You talked about civil liberties, you talked about fear, you talk about sort of like, what are the bigger questions that this is raising in terms of decision making, or in terms of groupthink, or in terms of sort of risk or relative risk, or how much risk we want to live in, or, I don't know. And maybe we're not in a place where we can answer any of those questions. And maybe the question just really is, what is the next step? But what's making that next step problematic is that you've got these two groups, or maybe three, but again, you've got these two groups of thinkers who think, send them all out there, start this economy going, let's take the risk, and the no, stay in your house until the end of June, July, August, we'll never play a baseball game again. Like, I don't know where to sit. I don't know where, if you're a person just sitting at home and you're listening to both of those arguments, what do you do? How do you make a decision?
Well, there has to be some compromise both ways. I think it is like, we have to send some people back. Obviously, maybe not in New York City right now, but there's certain places like Los Angeles, California, we're not getting hit that hard. Do we need to be in lockdown? Generally people are in their cars. There's not a lot of social interaction anyway. Maybe you start to let certain businesses come back and track it and see what happens. It's also the impact that this is having on people who, low-income workers who are paycheck to paycheck, who don't work in front of the computer, don't work from home. I mean, that's a real thing. I mean, I'm fortunate where a lot of the work that I do is online. So I've been impacted, but I still have income coming in. Mm-hmm. For a lot of people, that's not the case. And I mean, they have to survive. I mean, what are they doing?
But
$1,200 is not enough to get them through another month. Never mind this month.
But you send, like in Georgia, they're trying to open things up and nobody's going out. So you can send those workers back to work. But if demand isn't there, right? If you have an economy that's based on consumerism and there are no consumers because they're afraid to go out, what do? You have a very traumatized population now who are afraid.
Why are they traumatized? The media. Can we rant on the media? Fucking media?
I do think that I mean, a lot of people died and they died fast. And there is something flu, it's like you don't really hear about, or you do, but then it's spread across 4, 5, 6 months, right? Here you have people, you turn on the news and it's like, that guy's gone, that guy's gone, that guy's gone. Like 3 members of one family gone like that. So, I mean, I do think that it's like, there's a little bit of reality in terms of the virus.
I think there's reality. I'm not trying to, the virus is not the flu. It obviously comes on a lot stronger, although we're not sure about the death rate. I think the death rate could end up being somewhere near the flu. I mean, just saw a statistic. It was the lowest number of people that died in the flu in like forever, 24,000. Oh, I wonder why that is. Last year was 2 years ago, it was 80,000 people died from the flu. This year it's 24,000. So we're not measuring these numbers accurately. We don't know enough. That's not to say we had to take it seriously. And because there were so many unknowns, right? You have to, in a sense, overreact to a situation. That's the best strategy.
Right.
But now we have more information. We know in some way we did overreact. Maybe not in New York City, but there was a general like, okay, maybe we overreacted a little bit. That was still the right thing to do. But now we're here. So what do we do? I think the first thing is, I think the media's got to stop pumping out this fear. It's nonstop. This is really what I wanted to talk to you about. What did you make of this whole thing with the bleach that Trump said that people need to drink bleach? Because I'll tell you, it triggered something so deep inside me.
Triggered that he said it, or the response? The response.
And I tweeted something out the day previous. Basically, I'm getting a lot of calls from my liberal friends, extremely concerned about the insanity of the left, which is true. Some of my liberal friends are calling me up because I'm a safe space for them, saying, I'm starting to see your point. Like, I think the left has gone mad. What the fuck is going on? Biden? I'm like, I told you. I'm like, I don't like Trump. That's what they're saying. It's like, that's okay. You don't have to get on the Trump bandwagon, but they're starting to see it. So I tweeted it out. I had one friend just come after me, a guy that I love who's really close, and basically end the relationship. And in some level, like, I guess this is it for now. What I just said, like, that I'm getting calls from my liberal friends who are concerned about that was the tweet that he responded to. And obviously the reaction was, what about the insanity of Trump? And it's like, okay, well, that's not what I'm talking about, but okay. And it devolved into that. And then the whole bleach thing. And there's people that I know and love, like Caitlin Flanagan and Paul Bloom. These are people, I don't know them, but they're on Twitter and I love them. I love their writing. I love their thinking. I listen to podcasts. And they're just 100% convinced. Like, they really honestly believe that Trump said people should drink bleach, Lysol. Like, that's a thing that they think that he actually said. Now, I'm open to the idea that he misspoke and it's irresponsible and he's got to be careful about what he says. Obviously, he didn't mean that, but he needs to be careful. And, but that's not what they're saying. What they're saying is that they believe that he actually was suggesting that drinking bleach, ingesting Lysol might be a cure for COVID-19. And so in my mind, it's like, how dumb do you think that he actually is? I understand you think he's really dumb, but that's like a kind of like a 70 IQ person. And if he's that dumb, if you really honestly believe he's that dumb, if we take that logic all the way and you couldn't beat him, and it looks like you may not be able to beat him again, then how dumb are you? It doesn't hold up as an argument that he's that stupid or that insane. And then, of course, when you look at the video that was circulating of this technology, which is a real technology that's being developed at Cedars-Sinai, where they take a light and you ingest the light. The light works as a disinfectant and goes into the lungs. This is all what he said. And he got a little mixed up, but this was what he was clearly referring to. Somebody had briefed him on it. And it goes into the lungs and it kills the coronavirus, this light therapy. And of course, people hear light therapy and Trump talking about light therapy and it sounds crazy. And then he says disinfectant and, they go crazy with it. But it's like the irresponsibility. Why don't you just put up your hand and say, excuse me, Mr. President, I heard you say disinfectant and ingest. I assume you're not talking about household cleaner. Like, just clear it up. But no, you're going to take that information. You're going to go out. You're going to tweet it all over. And then a bunch of people are going to buy into it. And it just makes me sad because that's the reality that they're living in. I'm living in a completely different reality. I'm open to the arguments that Trump, if you think he's a bad president or you think he's irresponsible, I'm open to all of those arguments. But if you really think that he said that, I don't know how to connect with you. And the pain of the disconnection.
But are you well, yeah, I guess the argument isn't about what they actually think. I think it's opportunity. I mean, he threw him that one. He threw him.
Okay, fair enough. Look, fair enough.
Not intentionally. I think I don't.
But
I
no,
don't
but it's fine. It's fine if Jim Acosta is going to do that because it's like that's what Jim Acosta does. I'm not talking about Jim Acosta or Vox or the particular players who are going to always take the bait and use it. right, for their own political purposes. I'm talking about Caitlin Flanagan and Sam Harris and Paul Bloom. These are the intelligentsia of the country who should be more responsible, but who literally think that's I know that's what they think. They don't think he misspoke. They think that's what he meant. They're explicit in saying that.
And so their theory is that he wants to kill people in saying that's
he's just that stupid. Like he's an insane person.
Stupid.
Like he's a crazy person. Like he's a person that actually takes in information and then it goes, maybe you just ingest with Lysol and because if you read the articles that were written and articles that they were sharing, you would come away with the impression that he literally use the words that you should drink bleach. And so that is, there's something, and there's been incidents like this before, but there was something about this one. And maybe because the thing that was going on with my friend, and maybe because I've come out a little bit more on Twitter with, my belief systems around all this, but it triggered this deep pain of disconnection. Mm-hmm. Like it was scary to me. And, and it feels like how I grew up. There was kind of this madness, and I could see this is, I'd raise my hand. I'm like, that's not what's going on. That's not true. And then I was told that I was wrong or I was bad for seeing what I saw.
Right.
And then I got to keep myself small. And there's this rage and pain and loneliness, and all of that is getting triggered inside me. And yesterday I literally had a 3-hour episode where I don't know what was going on. I was completely regressed. I couldn't do anything. I was just overcome with this intense anxiety. There was a part of my brain that knew it's like, yeah, you're triggered. You're deep in your history and has something to do with all this. So I know, like, in a way I'm in my history, but there's also a way, like, I'm also in reality, because it's like, this is a situation where I've just lost connection with a friend. That's real. That's not a trigger.
Well, I think the wounding there is if I stay in what I believe to be true, I will lose connection.
Yeah.
And to the extent that I'm dependent on other to stay with me, I will suffer in that, my truth or their truth. Like, what do I do here? And then there's literally the madness that forms from being gaslit. I mean, there's a form of gaslighting in that. And so, I mean, the only way through that is to be willing to stand alone in your truth, in what's true for you.
Yeah.
And to know that if that other person needs to stand in that truth, that he intentionally did that, or he's that dumb, it's like, okay. And then if that ends the relationship, you have to kind of sit in the pain of that.
But it's not, this is the thing. They're not dumb people. And this was the other question I wanted to ask you, because I was thinking about this. They, like, you'd hear this expression, Trump derangement syndrome, and it's used in a pejorative way and to mock people. But I actually think there's something to it. I think that the people were traumatized, legitimately traumatized by the election of Trump. I think it was such a shattering of reality for them, that it was traumatic, that there was a disassociation, that there was a denial, right? A resistance formed against this truth. And there's all kinds of pain and fear that is being evoked. Like it's a real trauma response. And so that when I hear people that are generally intelligent, the most intelligent people in the country, some of them, buying into the Trump, suggested people drink bleach, I can only assume that they're traumatized. Like there's some form of, like they've been traumatized by this election. And maybe, because this is my whole theory, what Trump represents in some way, he's the reality show president. And it's not like he came in and turned it into a reality show. It's always been a reality show. He's just exposing it for what it actually is. And that's the thing that is traumatic, right? Our illusions about politics and about the media are being shattered in front of our eyes. And there's those of us who've seen it in advance. And I can say for me, it was painful. It still is painful when you start to see the lies that are baked into these institutions and people that you know and trust realizing they're living out a delusion, that there's literally Anderson Cooper thinks he's capable of objective reporting. Like
He's not.
you know what I mean? It's like, it's okay that you're not objective, dude, but like to pretend that you're capable of rising above your own bias is insanity. Nobody is, which is why in some way Fox News, in their craziness early on, became the most honest, right? Where everyone else was still pretending. And so now it's like, I feel like that's what Trump has exposed, this game, and that we're all in it to try to get attention. And it's just pro wrestling. It's just pro wrestling. And this is the other thing that I tweeted out, which is sort of a stolen idea, but people are starting to understand. It's that moment in time when everyone's like, we all know pro wrestling is fake. It's fake. And then they admitted it. It's like, okay, yeah, it's fake. And then everyone's like, it's okay. We still like pro wrestling. Pro wrestling got even more popular and it became more fun. And I feel like we're at that moment with politics and the media. It's like, dude, everybody knows this is fake. Everybody turns on CNN. The vast majority of people, they know it's just a show. They're watching it to enjoy it.
I don't know if they know it's a show.
Well, maybe no, they don't. They don't all know, but a lot of people do. A lot of people are starting to see it, and they're not people saying, "Oh no, Fox is real and CNN is bullshit." They're like, "No, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit.
Yeah,
New York Times is bullshit. Breitbart is bullshit." And when I say bullshit, I don't mean it's bullshit, but it's like they have an agenda, they have a bias. This idea that there is somehow objective reporting out there, that is something that is in the past. That is a fantasy that no longer exists. And I think a lot of people, and this fantasy about our president being this moral icon, which was always bullshit. I mean, look at John F. Kennedy. Look at all this fucking history of the presidents. They're all psychos. And maybe that comes with power. The kind of person that wants to be president is going to have some dark shadow. I think Obama's got it. I think he hides it particularly well. But he's got tons of psychopathic qualities. And with Trump, it's just, he just wears it out in the open. He doesn't give a shit. And there's something that's being exposed that is very hard for some people. It's hard for me to come to terms with. And I feel like I'm been thinking about this stuff for a long time. But for people who haven't been, I think they're traumatized. I think it's like Neo in the Matrix, where he shows them what the fucking Matrix is, and he comes out of it. He's just like, he's lost his mind. That's what I see going on. Am I crazy?
Well, that's a separate question.
Well, I know I'm crazy, but
no, you're not.
But
I mean, I guess that I
clarify.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I need to clarify. It's more just, I guess, the way that I think I understand it at this point is twofold. One, populism threatens the privileged class.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I would say populism could also be just like the simplicity of Trump, like the sort of simpleton aspect of him, like a certain lack of sophistication, a certain kind of, I don't know, which I at times find refreshing, frankly. But so I think that that's frightening, that people's privilege is being threatened, whatever side of the coin, whatever party you're in, there's privilege on both sides, right, to a great extent. So I think that's the first thing. And then I think the other thing is that, we've deferred personal responsibility to leaders who make us feel like daddy's going to take care of it, or, somebody's, I don't know. And I think that what we're kind of witnessing is this idea of like, they're not going to save you, like that. They don't have the answer. And in fact, they're making it worse. Right. And I think that's what's being shattered, is the illusion of being taken care of. Yeah. And and the things that people are willing to look away, like to look away at certain behaviors because of that kind of good daddy, whether it's Clinton or JFK or anyone else. Right. And I just think that that's what we're awakening to. And that's a good thing, because to awaken to your notion of like, and that's what I think is interesting about the virus. At the end of the day, it's people's personal responsibility. It's like, do I decide to go outside? Do I decide to wash my hands? Do I decide to not cough on someone? Do I decide to stay home if I'm sick? Like, it's on you being me, all of that. That's a very different sort of, there's something Trump or Obama or Bush could say that would change at the end of the day, that's the decision you got to make for yourself. And so that's a new way of being here.
Yeah. I I think you're right. That makes a lot of sense. I feel that energy of like you're on your own. You can't trust these people, and I want them to have as little power as possible. It's centralized power. And I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and one of the things that I hope is a result of this whole coronavirus things is that we come back into communities, like smaller communities. And you hear this, the word decentralization, you hear it in terms of Bitcoin and the blockchain, but just as a concept, and certainly globalization, it seems like is going to take a hit because of the coronavirus, that we can't have our, manufacturing chains going back to China. We've got to bring it locally. And I wonder if that whole concept is going to take across the board, and that, because I'm up here in a small town, right? I live in a small town. It's 3,500 people. And I can feel this place where it's like, I don't need Gavin Newsom in California or Donald Trump in Washington to come and help me out. Yeah, if there's a massive fire and a tragedy, help us out. But otherwise, we'll handle it. We're fine. We got a little community here. We'll work it out among ourselves. And somehow it feels more sane and more real. I mean, I remember driving my motorcycle through Montana. It was the first time I ever conceived of the kind of the rationale of the guns rights activists and of conservatives in general. Because it's a big state, and I was driving through it for a couple of days and stopping in towns. You start to get the feel of things. And I remember thinking, man, if I lived here, I wouldn't want some Princeton grad liberal senator telling me how to live. I'd be like, fuck you. Or even a conservative. I don't care who you are. I'm out here in Montana. You've probably never been here. You don't know how I live. You can't tell me what gun I can or cannot own. I mean, I felt the energy of that and the rightness of it. It was the first time in my life that I'd felt that. It felt good to feel that. I'm also very sympathetic to people, when they see a mass shooting, and it's like, what the fuck are we doing? How can you walk into a store? How can an 18-year-old buy an AR-15? Yeah, I'm sympathetic to that as well. But there's something about this, and I like that Trump is basically saying, to the states, at least in terms of the decisions, you're on your own.
Right. But I think, this goes back to literally the founding of the country, where you had literally there were founders like John Adams who believed that man's impulses needed to be controlled because otherwise they would be Lord of the Flies. Right. And then Jefferson came in and said, man can control his own impulses. He needs he needs the freedom to be able to, and so it's like, it's not just, yes, I do think I want to control you or I want power, but I also think there's probably some belief that that sort of people need to be reined in, and that they don't know any better. They don't, unless they're controlled, their impulses will get the best of them, and then it'll lead to some kind of anarchy in the system. And so it has to be contained, right? And we know this in core that,
that's what the church is for. Isn't it? Isn't that why we have churches? To rein in the base impulse of human beings?
Originally.
Yeah.
Sure. But I guess my point is that I'm not sure it's all conscious in the sense of power grab. I think there's a conscious power grab.
No, I don't think it's conscious. No.
But I think underneath it, there is and it's projection, right? Because if you're assuming others can't contain their impulses, you must know that you can't contain your own.
Right.
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 So I think it's just, and that lends to why people need to do their own work. Because if you can find that sweet spot between your impulses and your ego, which can contain it, then you can pretty much function in the world fairly well as a fellow citizen. But none of us we haven't really done that work as a society, right?
No, we haven't. I think there's more and more people who are doing it. There's more and more people becoming conscious about, I say that, and then I go on Twitter and I just see it's just mass projection everywhere you go. Nobody wants to take responsibility for anything, for how they feel or how they think.
Right. So if you put that on the two sides of this, which is like, let me be free, right? Let me do whatever I want. And then you have the other side that's like, no, we're going to lock you down in your house for whatever. Yeah. It's a great example of like, either we have to be in compulsive ego control or we're in pure impulsivity and freedom.
Right.
And it's like,
I see what you're saying.
Neither one of those are right. It's that spot in the middle where we have capacity to hold both. some level of containment and control.
Yeah. And so it's perfect. That's kind of how I feel about the people who are like, no, we have to stay home. We have to stay home. We have to protect it. Okay. Fair enough. But then you also need people in Encinitas protesting, fuck this. No, I want to be free. Like you need both energies, and ultimately we're going to settle somewhere in the middle.
That's where responsible media could be such
there's no incentive. That's the problem for them to be responsible. There's zero incentive economically.
But imagine if that narrative, if that sort of idea of like,
well, I imagine. But the good news is that I think Joe Rogan is somebody who seems to be open. I mean, he interviews everybody, and he's pretty much down the middle as far as I can tell. And maybe you don't like Joe Rogan, but there's other people out there like him, but it's more what he represents. This guy has more power and influence, maybe not power and influence exactly in the structural realm, but he's going to very soon. He certainly has more viewers and more influence, direct influence, than anybody on CNN. I mean, just statistically speaking, the amount of downloads that he gets on his podcast, the amount of people who are listening or watching him on YouTube, it's unbelievable.
Who's his audience?
His audience is probably mostly guys like me, males from, probably 25 to 55. But he gets in all of the major intellectual thinkers in the country and has, long form debates about complicated issues. And he'll have people from the right, he'll have people from the left. I mean, he's open to all of it. That is the one place, and there's probably others, but that's the one place where that's happening. And it's the most popular podcast. So that is heartening to see that. And I think that is what's happening. New media is rising up, and maybe not, it doesn't have the institutional power, right? Because it's not embedded with it, but I think very soon it will. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, she's been on the Joe Rogan podcast twice, and I think she's going to be a major player in 2024. I think this run for her was, here I am, hi, I'm only 38, but I'll be 42 next time. And look at me. And he loves her. I mean, her and Eric Weinstein, they were saying, who would you like to have in charge? Because they were both lamenting that Trump was in charge. And they both said, Tulsi Gabbard. She seems really sensible. She probably handled this really well. And I was like, holy shit. So if Joe Rogan 4 years from now is on his podcast interviewing her and promoting her, well, that's going to have a massive impact, a lot more maybe 4 years from now than what CNN would have. Because, right now, and I think that's one of the things that happened with the election of Trump is that the mainstream media realized they're no longer the kingmaker. They have no power over anything. They did everything they can to stop this guy from getting elected, and he still got elected. And that feeling of, holy shit, we don't have control anymore. We don't have this influence. That had to be scary for them and their own sense of relevance.
Well, that's what I was saying about.
Yeah, exactly. And so now you see them, of course they want to censor the internet because that's their competition. You know what I mean? That's who's kicking their ass, So I think you're seeing, that's where you're seeing these power grabs right now. And what do you think about Bill Gates? I mean, to me, this is crazy. This guy sits up there, smug. I mean, look, I don't have any problem with Bill Gates. I think he does a lot of great things in the world, obviously through his foundation. But we're not going to return to normal. This is the thing he said. We're not going to return to normal until everybody's vaccinated. Well, first of all, we don't even know there's going to be a vaccination. Second of all, dude, do you mind running that by me? How about take a poll? See if people are down with that. You don't just sit up on your throne and fucking tell people what reality's going to be. I mean, it's the ego that this guy has. It's unbelievable. And then he doesn't understand why he's hated.
Well, his ego is only sort of relevant if he's got people who are listening to him and who will take his money. Right?
Well, everybody's going to take his money. Right. That's why people are listening to him. He writes big checks to the World Health Organization and other people.
But I think it goes back to what we were just talking about, which is this notion of like real personal responsibility. And responsibility is not just in your actions. It's choosing to inform yourself. It's choosing to have sort of a more open mind. It's choosing to tolerate some level of complexity, right?
What do you think about this idea? I mean, you brought it up, personal responsibility, but it's also what people are saying is, no, you need to stay home so I don't get sick. It's not just for you. And it's the same argument with the vaccine. You need to get the vaccine so all of us are safe, so all of the children are safe. And this is where it gets really complicated. It's like, so I have to sacrifice my personal liberty. I have to take this vaccine. I don't know what the fuck is in it. I know you're telling me it's safe, but if you guys get a lot of shit wrong. I'm just saying, and a lot of these studies are corrupted. Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure vaccines are a net good for society, but I got to take this thing for you. There's something I feel the part in me where it's just like, I'm not getting any goddamn fucking vaccine.
When I was a lobbyist, I worked on vaccines, and we would meet, with different entities, populations that wanted an exemption from mandatory vaccination or other. And it's really complicated.
Yeah. I feel really, the complication.
I mean, talk about having ownership of your body.
Right.
So, and choice, right?
Choice, yeah.
And, the way that kind of gets navigated is like, well, but your choice is affecting everybody, right? Your choice not to vaccinate affects everyone. Your other choices may only affect you and your, whatever. Yeah. But, so there's ways to massage that argument around choice and body, but it's tricky. And I do think that it's also driven by fear. And I do think it's not as simple as a power grab with vaccination. I mean, I think there's a money grab with vaccination.
Oh,
right?
For sure.
Right. But I think at a grassroots level, I think it's complicated. I think it just has a lot of different tentacles around belief systems, whether that's religious or
I'm open to, it's like you have a kid and some other kid's not vaccinated and that kid gives your kid the disease and the kid dies. Yeah, you're going to be pissed off. Why the fuck didn't you get the vaccine? On the other hand, these are not anecdotal stories. Kids are getting vaccines and they're getting fucked up from it. That's a thing. It's not 100% safe, right? It's what I don't know what percentage safety it is. 99% safe. That's still one kid out of 100. And maybe it's one kid out of 1,000 that is having some real problem.
Well, I also think,
but if that's your fucking kid.
But I also think it's a bigger question about risk and our tolerance for risk, which has decreased significantly, right? So when I was a kid, my parents took us to like places that would be deemed abused, like the jungles of Venezuela. And like, we'd come home and we'd have like worms and, my dad would be like, listen, you're building up some gut strength. Like you're building up immunity.
That's what my mom always told us.
Right, old in the dirt. And now you've got kids who are using so much hand sanitizer, so much stuff that they're getting sick all the time now, right? You're not out. So I'm not saying I'm for or against sort of the vaccine issue, but what I'm saying is that like, we have to be attentive to like, what are some of the secondary outcomes of this stuff?
It's interesting to me too, the whole situation with China. What was it? 98% of our medicine is made there, or some kinds of medicine, a lot of our medicine. And when people heard that, what? That makes no sense. Yeah. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen with all of that. This whole idea of globalization and the fact that the EU completely dropped the ball with Italy and Spain. I mean, they're like, we've had it with you fucking guys. We want out. We're like right behind Britain. You guys did shit for us. And if you heard from the UN and all this, the UN's done nothing. And the World Health Organization, it's just, no, it's not, no human to human transmission. Oh, okay. Sorry. No, there is human to human, but it's not that contagious. Okay. Actually it's contagious, but no, it's fine. International flights, no problem. They were wrong every step of the way. And then the whole thing with the mask, I understand, but I'm just saying you can make excuses for them. You can rationalize it. Nevertheless, that's their job. They got it wrong. And then the big one for me was the masks. Now, I understand why they told us not to wear masks. I understand they didn't want people hoarding them. They want enough for the medical people. I get it. But when you tell us, you lie, you flat out lie to our faces and say, no, you don't need them. They don't work. And then a month later you say, no, actually everybody's got to be wearing a mask. Well, that's it. We're done. Like your credibility is lost with me. I don't know what's coming out of your mouth next. You're fired, And it's like, and then they want to keep saying to us, you got to listen to the experts. Why would I listen to the experts? And these models, all the models were wrong. Now I listened to Scott Adams. He worked at a bank, and he said, and this was really interesting to me. Models are not there to prove anything. No, that's not true. They're not there to predict anything. They're there to prove a bias. So it's like, if you're doing an economic model, you have an instinct of what you think the economy is going to do. And you all sit in a room and you agree on it. And then you tell somebody to go make a model that's going to reflect what we're talking about so that we can go out and sell whatever it is we're trying to sell to people. And you plug in whatever numbers you have to plug in to create this mathematical model to get the result that you want. That's how these models work. That's how the climate change models work. And that's how these COVID-19 models work. That's not science. And this has to be exposed. I mean, these models were complete. And I'm just saying, like, people are looking at this shit. They're being told 2 million people are going to die. And 50,000 people are dead. Do you understand that the average person is going to be like, what the fuck is going on?
I mean, I think it'd be helpful to just put data out rather than models.
Right.
Right. Because data is real time. Data is, it's numbers, it's facts. It's sort of, this is what is happening in this moment. Models are projections of what could be if we do that, if we don't do that. Right. And then you've got a very afraid population. And when you're afraid, by the way, especially around health, you're at something like, I was in a part of a study once that looked at when it comes to health information, we learn at a 6th grade reading level. That's the level we're at, because we're in such a fear response when it comes to our own health, that our capacity for understanding complex ideas are not there. Yeah. So not only are you not presenting data, you're presenting projections that are, to your point, biased towards an idea, right? That are never positive, they don't help the case that it's not positive. And then you've got a very fearful population who's taking that in, who doesn't have the capacity to sort of sort through, right? Not because they're not capable, but like literally in their response, they can't. So what do you think that lends to?
Yeah.
It lends to hoarding toilet paper and hoarding masks. And it makes sense. I know. And you know what? If I was running things, I'm not saying I'd be doing any better. It's probably an impossible task. I guess the way I was raised by a diagnostician. And so my dad taught us, like, you got to know what the questions are before you start looking for answers. Like, you've got to figure out, like, what are the questions here? And so as I have the privilege, because I'm in a safe space and I have my job still, like, I have the privilege to sit back and say, what are the questions here? Like, what, and I'm trying to figure that out. I don't know if I totally know yet. I know that crisis happens when there's too much contradiction of the truth. I know that eventually the system erupts and says, we can't whistle past this anymore. And so I'm aware enough that this is maybe a moment of saying, we gotta move towards something that's more true, whatever that truth is. I sense that crisis kind of exposes darkness in a system, and that's what's happening. Like, I believe that. I believe that there's some level about personal responsibility here and not deferring to experts and leaders. I mean, we need people that have studied this and have knowledge. We need that. It's not,
yes, of course,
they're relevant, but at the end of the day, it's like, okay, I'm responsible for taking that information, sifting through what feels right, true for me, and then taking an action in service of myself and my community. And it's like, do we have the capacity to do that? I don't know. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to be more in what the questions are. I don't necessarily know if I have any, I don't know if there are any answers, but I don't necessarily know if I have any.
Well, I think we're in the fog of war.
Yes.
We're in the middle of this thing. There's no way anybody can really accurately assess the situation. We're not going to know for years, and we don't have enough information. We don't have enough data. So, and so in that case, I understand the stay-at-home people. It's like, we don't know anything, so let's just stay at home.
Right.
But that's just not my instinct, right? Like, I have an instinct on some kind of primal level. If there was fear out in the woods and there's a bear out there I'm not locking down. Eventually, I'm going to go out and I'm going to kill this fucking bear. What am I staying here forever? I'm going to go out and face the bear. Well, you might die, but what am I going to stay here forever?
Right.
You know, that's my instinct. I understand other people have other instincts, but I'm not staying locked up forever. That's just not the way I would do it.
And I think I saw, maybe you said it to me. Someone sent it to me about, you know, we are on defense. Like we're responding to this crisis on defense. And what would an offensive strategy look like?
Right.
Like,
what would Bill Belichick do?
Yes.
You know, it would, everybody would be like, what is he doing? That makes no sense. And he was like, I've ran the numbers. Although Belichick doesn't always run the numbers. I mean, that timeout that he should have called in that game against Seattle, when they asked him about it, he's like, I don't know. I had an instinct. Everyone's like, why did he call it time? Why did he call it? And the guy's like, remember the assistant coach was looking at him? He was just like, he didn't say anything. He just sat there, watched, and then interception. They won. That was one of the most remarkable moments. So that guy's some kind of genius, obviously, intuitive genius. But what would Belichick do?
I do think that, and I think that's what I thought, where I thought Trump was going when he initially talked about this being a battle, this being a war. I'm a wartime president. It's like, well, then play offense. Like, what does offense look like? And I don't, maybe it looks like bringing a vaccine to market really fast. Maybe it looks like, loosening regulations with the FDA so that things can come to market. I don't think that's worked well because now there's all this shit product in the market. But it's like, what would playing offense on an individual level look like?
Well, I think my perception of Trump is he's a rah-rah guy. He's like, stay positive. And so he's always looking for the positive in anything. He doesn't want to go negative. He doesn't want to spread fear. And obviously that's, the media is going to call that out every time because they're all about fear. And I think he's a little beaten down by it. That's what I get. He had a little clip with Yahoo News today where they were wrong about something, and what's her name? The female doctor that's always with them.
Deborah Birx.
Yeah, she was, clarifying the numbers, and Trump just laid into the Yahoo guys like, yeah, you guys were fucking wrong. You gonna apologize? You guys were fucking, and you can see he's fed up. So I think he's angry. It's unfortunate. I mean, he should probably stop doing these press conferences. I mean, he gets a lot of juice out of it, but, cause the hydrochloroquine situation, like doctors are using it all over the place. That's the truth. I mean, the press can say whatever they want. I listen to all these different reports. Doctors are using it with zinc. It's effective. There's very little side effect. They're taking, it's fine. So, but he said all that shit. He got hammered for it. And they say, oh, there's this study, and it's all bullshit. It's all fucking bullshit. And so I think he's a little bit, he thought maybe that in this crisis moment that he would get some love and appreciation, but he's getting shit. And I'm not going to say that he doesn't create his own reality here. Like he's responsible for what he's getting. He's a dick. There's no question. But, it's a little disconcerting just to see the press just try to gotcha question day in, day out. I don't know. It would wear on me. But I'm not saying I don't want to make him out to be the victim because he sets himself up for it. He likes the conflict, but there's something.
Well, who's the real victim here?
It's the people, the American people,
right.
Although, but this is what we like. I mean, they're tuning in. So, I mean, he's giving them, they're giving him a show. It's another show every day.
I guess what I worry about is like, and there are certainly populations who will say this has always been real in terms of the impact that decisions have on people. But these decisions now, whether it's the media or Trump or anybody else, are having real-time impact on everybody. And it has a bigger consequence now than maybe it did before. And I don't know if people want to be in the game. I don't think anyone feels. I think it's
too much responsibility.
Well, I think it's like it really feels live or die for people.
Yeah.
And the game is a luxury at that point.
Right.
That point, And I personally, I'm just desperate for sort of some
But
I don't know.
maybe, you look back at these war generals, I read history and it was all a game. World War One, Churchill loved it. I mean, you read about Churchill, it was just all a game to him. He was so sad when it was over.
I think we romanticize sort of.
I'm just saying throughout history, this whole idea, war was a game for the elites. The king would sit up there on the side of the hill and he'd have his cigar and his tea and he'd watch the battlefield and a bunch of guys killing each other. I mean, I guess I'm not, maybe it's a cynical point of view, but maybe it's always been a game and there's no way out of it. This is just how we do it, what we do. I mean, it's like when people say they get into relationships, like, I don't want to play games. It's like, yeah, good luck with that. It's nothing but a game.
Well, there's a lot of charge in gamemanship.
Yeah.
Right. And we want to feel alive. So if we feel alive through negative pleasure, then let's have a war.
But I hear your point. There are life and death decisions that are being made.
Yeah.
And the bullshit that both the president and the press are engaging in is dangerous and irresponsible.
Yes. I have yelled at the TV many a time saying like you are killing people by what you're doing.
Yeah.
Get your shit together and get on the same team, and you don't have to agree, but this is not your opportunity to shine. And it's and the death ticker on CNN is horrific. And the death, I think MSNBC.
They have a death
CNN,
ticker? I don't want to see
that.
Oh my God.
And from a mental health standpoint, my sense is that the trauma of that's traumatizing to see it. Like this, and there's, I get sort of wanting to make it real for people so they understand, so they don't get complacent or they don't forget that this is happening. I don't know how they could, but there's something very, I don't know. I don't even think
it feels a little like, future generations will look back and go, they had a death ticker, the way we look back and go, they had public executions. Like it just when you say death ticker,
I'm calling it that.
Feel good.
It just has on the right, like every time there's another.
Yeah, and it doesn't. It's also it's ridiculous because we know that we're not counting these deaths accurately.
Well, that's a separate issue.
I know, but if you know that you're not counting the deaths accurately, exactly, don't have a death ticker. It's even the Johns Hopkins website where they have, that's the kind of the website where they have a death ticker, and it's obviously very comprehensive because it's worldwide. So it's a map of the world, and then they have the areas in red where the virus is, but it's completely disproportionate. Mm-hmm. It's like, it makes it look like the world is completely on fire. Like if you look at this map, you're like, oh my God, it's terrifying. So there's just things like that psychologically. And even the word social distancing, or the phrase, is that a healthy framing?
I think
social distancing. What about physical distancing?
Yeah, I think people are trying to move away from the social piece and into the physical piece, because that's more the truth.
Yeah, social distancing. It's not. Yeah, it's all that little stuff it's meaningful.
No, I agree.
I'm scared that we're of the long-term social ramifications. I mean, I go on my hikes here, and I cross one or two people. And there's always this, usually you just cross, how you doing? Now, because nobody's wearing a mask. Well, occasionally somebody on the hike is wearing a mask, but we're out in open nature. Nobody really cares. But there's this moment where we're like, somebody climbs up the side of the hill, so we're 6 feet away so they can pass, and people are kind of acknowledging each other, but not afraid to make eye contact. I don't know. It's weird. And I'm just concerned that that's going to continue indefinitely. Are you concerned about that?
I'm not concerned about it in the long run. I think people just do weird shit when they're afraid. So I think that we're all afraid, and we're all kind of being, not brainwashed, what's the right word, but our nervous system is adjusting to this idea that other people are threatening. And so we're starting to live that out in real time.
Yeah, other people are threatening. Exactly.
Yeah, people now are a threat. Like people, even I said to my mom, I was like, do you want me to come up to Boston to be with you for Mother's Day? And she's like, nope, it's not, even like, I'm like, well, my mother shouldn't see me as a threat, but I'm a threat, and like, that's kind of like, that's what I worry about is sort of, if we want to create community and we need each other, then we need to not see each other as potential existential threats. But I also believe, I remember being at a meeting in Brazil with all these like health policy people, and we were talking about how you make healthcare decisions, how each country makes healthcare decisions. And I think it was like the Argentinian foreign minister or someone stood up and said, the problem with you Americans is that you're so afraid of death that you will keep someone alive until they're like 120 years old and spend all, because most healthcare dollars go towards the last, 80% of the dollars go towards the end of life.
Yeah.
Right. And in other countries, they make very different decisions because they actually do have more of a different relationship with death. And so there is something to be said about, will this, as this crisis has brought us a little closer to the idea of mortality, that's potentially a positive thing, because so much of our energy goes towards staving off this inevitability of death. So much energy goes to it. But imagine if you could take that and channel it towards kind of just being in acceptance that that's going to happen and we don't have to do everything to avoid it. Like it has the potential to be a game changer.
I started reading The Denial of Death for that reason. I'd never read that book. It's incredible. It's a great book, holds up. And they go, into the issue. Where does this denial of death come from? And they're exploring it. And I think it is a big issue. And I like this positive death movement that you've seen out in the country, these death salons. You've heard about that, where people get together and they talk about death, because it's insane, that we're so, how do we know death isn't awesome? Like, we don't know that. Death could be the most amazing thing ever. And then you go into wherever you go and you look back and you're like, what was I so afraid of? Like, we got to and just economically, it makes no sense. I mean, thank God my mother's like, she's got her whole insurance set up because she doesn't want me or my brother to have to spend a dime keeping her alive or for her funeral or any of that stuff. It's the same for me. I don't want you to spend, if I have millions of dollars, I want you to spend it on keeping me alive an extra couple of years. It's like, donate that money to charity or some shit. Mm-hmm. Dude, I lived 85 years. It's okay. See ya.
But I think but we don't, I mean, that's not I think there are pockets of communities in our country that very much already live that way. But
the Irish are very accepting of death. I know.
Right.
I think the Italians. And I have an Irish background. That's why we're like, death awake is a party.
Right. Right. I think that, so long as we think in terms of certain duality, you're either alive or you're dead.
Yeah.
And being alive, we're told, is far better than being dead. Right. And death is also just surrender of the ego. And so we're so attached to our ego, the notion of losing that, whether it's our identity, our privilege, or whether it's our physical death, we can't tolerate that.
Very confronting to challenge somebody's fear. Like when people are afraid of something, they're very attached to it. And you say to them, hey, you don't need to be afraid of this. They attack. Instantly they attack. They feel offended. They feel like you're an asshole. They feel like you're wrong. Obviously you can't tell somebody they shouldn't be afraid of the thing they're afraid of. Nevertheless, I do think, I agree with you around death. It would be very helpful for society to change our relationship to it and our fear, whatever this fear is around it.
Well, and I think, one of the
death ticker, it's right there. It's all right there.
All right. But I mean, exposure therapy, which is so much of, I think, what the work we do is, this idea of like exposing someone to that thing that they fear so much and then desensitizing them to it is an effective form of treatment for anxiety in particular. So it's like, we need exposure therapy to death. We need to sort of lean into the idea of it, not as a way of another way of controlling for it, because you can go the opposite, right? You can all of a sudden become so positive death that suddenly you have just as much of control over it as you did before. And that's not healthy either. but we do have to stop whistling past it.
There's a thinking that ayahuasca is a ceremony that is preparing you for death, because apparently when you die, DMT is released from is this your pituitary? Is this what this is? Whatever. There's DMT. What is this gland here in your forehead? What do you call that? Third eye? Anyway, there's a gland there, and it releases DMT when you die, apparently. Mm-hmm. And ayahuasca, that's what the compound is, DMT, that gives you these visions. And it dissolves your ego. Like that's the feeling you have, which is why it can be so terrifying. But once you let go and surrender to it, it's like, so there's this idea that ayahuasca is a preparation for death. And I got to say, I think it's true, at least for me. I feel much less afraid of death because of all the ayahuasca ceremonies I've done. Also the vision quest, the 4 days, no food or water. I mean, you go 4 days out there, no water. By the fourth day, you're like, what the fuck, man? A couple more days of this, I'm dead.
Right.
And you just start to surrender to it. You're like, well, okay. Like, it's like, this is just another part of life.
Right.
Like you feel that. It's like, okay, this is my humanity.
I mean, the narrative, it's like, so if you think of birth and death as sort of very similar, they're both transitions into a new state of consciousness. We celebrate births, right? It's right. And they say birth is actually a more traumatizing of an event than death. Because the baby's like that coming out of the canal, you're in your womb, suddenly you're out, right?
God.
I mean but
never mind the pain of the mother.
Right. But the narrative about birth versus the narrative about death in our culture are very different. So it's like at the very top level, it's a narrative. And then it goes down to just the ego and the physiological piece and the visceral experience and the unknown of it and the psychology of the unknown. I mean, there's so many layers to us really, and duality to us really having a different relationship with death. And that to me is like one of the offerings of this.
I agree. And, it'd be great to do something with it. The problem is nobody's going to show up. To get people to come to a death salon, to try to change people's conceptions about death. It's a tough topic to sell.
No, but I don't know if I would sell it as kind of, I wouldn't sell it as I think. How
do you sell it?
I think anytime you ask someone to age, you're asking them to lean into death. Anytime that anytime you ask someone to, end a relationship, you're asking them to be
right.
Anytime, it's like you left Hollywood and you came, like that was a death. Yeah. Right. And so I don't think we have to go full throttle, because at the end of the day, we don't know physical death until we know it. So it's like, we die every day anyway, but can we lean into that and not resist it so much? And that's, I think, the way to, and then we can change our policies. We can agree to sort of not sustain life to 120. Maybe we say, whatever it is, I'm saying it can show up at a more macro level. Right. But on a day-to-day basis, it's like, what's my relationship to surrender or death or change or not getting my way or aging or losing? Because that's what death is. It's all of those things.
Aimee Falchuk, thank you.